For a few moments there came upon him a sort of fear. The woman before him, with distorted features and burning eyes, seemed hardly human, and the only thing that seemed a reality of his sister, as she had been, was her wealth of golden hair, and this was now streaked with grey. She eyed her brother with a long, cold stare, and he, too, as he looked and began to realize the actuality of her presence, found the hatred of her which he had had, once again surging up in his heart. All the brooding passion of the past year seemed to find a voice at once as he asked her, "Why are you here? You're dead and buried." "I am here, Wickham Delandre, for no love of you, but because I hate another even more than I do you." A great passion blazed in her eyes. "Him?" he asked in so fierce a whisper that even the woman was for an instant startled till she regained her calm. "Yes, him," she answered. "But make no mistake, my revenge is my own, and I merely use you to help me to it." Wickham asked suddenly, "Did he marry you?" The woman's distorted face broadened out in a ghastly attempt at a smile. It was a hideous mockery, for the broken features and seamed scars took strange shapes and strange colours, and queer lines of white showed out as the straining muscles pressed on the old cicatrices. "So you would like to know. It would please your pride to feel that your sister was truly married. Well, you shall not know. That was my revenge on you, and I do not mean to change it by a hair's breadth. I have come here tonight simply to let you know that I am alive, so that if any violence be done me where I am going, there may be a witness." "Where are you going?" demanded her brother. "That is my affair, and I have not the least intention of letting you know." Wickham stood up, but the drink was on him, and he reeled and fell. As he lay on the floor, he announced his intention of following his sister, and with an outburst of splenetic humour told her that he would follow her through the darkness by the light of her hair and of her beauty. At this she turned on him, and said that there were others beside him that would rue her hair and her beauty too. "As he will," she hissed, "for the hair remains though the beauty be gone. When he withdrew the linchpin and sent us over the precipice into the torrent, he had little thought of my beauty. Perhaps his beauty would be scarred like mine, were he whirled, as I was, amongst the rocks of the Visp, and frozen on the ice-pack in the drift of the river. But let him beware. His time is coming." And with a fierce gesture she flung open the door and passed out into the night. Later on that night, Mrs. Brent, who was but half asleep, became suddenly awake and spoke to her husband. "Geoffrey, was not that the click of a lock somewhere below our window?" But Geoffrey, though she thought that he too had started at the noise, seemed sound asleep and breathed heavily. Again Mrs. Brent dozed, but this time awoke to the fact that her husband had arisen and was partially dressed. He was deadly pale, and when the light of the lamp which he had in his hand fell on his face, she was frightened at the look in his eyes. "What is it, Geoffrey? What dost thou?" she asked. "Hush, little one," he answered, in a strange, hoarse voice. "Go to sleep. I am restless, and wish to finish some work I left undone." "Bring it here, my husband," she said. "I am lonely, and I fear when thou art away." For reply he merely kissed her and went out, closing the door behind him. She lay awake for a while, and then nature asserted itself, and she slept. Suddenly she started broad awake, with the memory in her ears of a smothered cry from somewhere not far off. She jumped up and ran to the door and listened, but there was no sound. She grew alarmed for her husband, and called out, "Geoffrey! Geoffrey!" After a few moments the door of the great hall opened, and Geoffrey appeared at it, but without his lamp. "Hush!" he said in a sort of whisper, and his voice was harsh and stern. "Hush! Get to bed. I am working and must not be disturbed. Go to sleep and do not wake the house." With a chill in her heart, for the harshness in her husband's voice was new to her, she crept back to bed and lay there trembling, too frightened to cry, and listened to every sound. There was a long pause of silence, and then the sound of some iron implement striking muffled blows. Then there came a clang of heavy stone falling, followed by a muffled curse. Then a dragging sound, and then more noise of stone on stone. She lay all the while in an agony of fear, and her heart beat dreadfully. She heard a curious sort of scraping sound, and then there was silence. Presently the door opened gently, and Geoffrey appeared. His wife pretended to be asleep, but through her eyelashes she saw him wash from his hands something white that looked like lime. In the morning he made no allusion to the previous night, and she was afraid to ask any question. From that day there seemed some shadow over Geoffrey Brent. He neither ate nor slept as he had been accustomed, and his former habit of turning suddenly as though someone were speaking from behind him revived. The old hall seemed to have some kind of fascination for him. He used to go there many times in the day, but grew impatient if anyone, even his wife, entered it. When the builder's foreman came to inquire about continuing his work, Geoffrey was out driving. The man went into the hall, and when Geoffrey returned, the servant told him of his arrival and where he was. With a frightful oath he pushed the servant aside and hurried up to the old hall. The workman met him almost at the door, and as Geoffrey burst into the room he ran against him. The man apologized. "Beg pardon, sir, but I was just going out to make some inquiries. I directed 12 sacks of lime to be sent here, but I see there are only 10. "Curse the 10 sacks and the 12 too," was the ungracious and incomprehensible rejoinder. The workman looked surprised, and tried to turn the conversation. "I see, sir, there's a little matter which our people must have done, but the governor will of course see it set right at his own cost." "What do you mean?" "That here hearthstone, sir. Some idiot must have put a scaffold pole on it and cracked it right down the middle, and it's thick enough you'd think to stand anythink." Geoffrey was silent for quite a minute, and then said in a constrained voice, and with much gentler manner, "Tell your people that I am not going on with the work in the hall at present. I want to leave it as it is for a while longer." "All right, sir. I'll send up a few of our chaps to take away these poles and lime bags and tidy the place up a bit." "No, no," said Geoffrey. "Leave them where they are. I shall send and tell you when you are to get on with the work." So the foreman went away, and his comment to his master was, "I'd send in the bill, sir, for the work already done. 'Pears to me that money's a little shaky in that quarter." Once or twice Delandre tried to stop Brent on the road, and at last, finding that he could not attain his object, rode after the carriage, calling out, "What has become of my sister, your wife?" Geoffrey lashed his horses into a gallop, and the other, seeing from his white face and from his wife's collapse almost into a faint that his object was attained, rode away with a scowl and a laugh. That night, when Geoffrey went into the hall, he passed over to the great fireplace, and all at once started back with a smothered cry. Then with an effort he pulled himself together and went away, returning with a light. He bent down over the broken hearthstone to see if the moonlight falling through the storied window had in any way deceived him. Then with a groan of anguish he sank to his knees. There, sure enough, through the crack in the broken stone, were protruding a multitude of threads of golden hair just tinged with grey. He was disturbed by a noise at the door, and looking round, saw his wife standing in the doorway. In the desperation of the moment he took action to prevent discovery, and lighting a match at the table, stooped down and burned away the hair that rose through the broken stone. Then, rising as nonchalantly as he could, he pretended surprise at seeing his wife beside him. For the next week he lived in an agony, for, whether by accident or design, he could not find himself alone in the hall for any length of time. At each visit the hair had grown afresh through the crack, and he had to watch it carefully, lest his terrible secret should be discovered. He tried to find a receptacle for the body of the murdered woman outside the house, but someone always interrupted him, and once, when he was coming out of the private doorway, he was met by his wife, who began to question him about it, and manifested surprise that she should not have before noticed the key which he now reluctantly showed her. Geoffrey dearly and passionately loved his wife, so that any possibility of her discovering his dread secrets, or even of doubting him, filled him with anguish, and after a couple of days had passed, he could not help coming to the conclusion that, at least, she suspected something. That very evening she came into the hall after her drive, and found him there sitting moodily by the deserted fireplace. She spoke to him directly. "Geoffrey, I have been spoken to by that fellow Delandre, and he says horrible things. He tells me that a week ago his sister returned to his house, the wreck and ruin of her former self, with only her golden hair as of old, and announced some fell intention. He asked me where she is, and oh, Geoffrey, she is dead, she is dead! So how can she have returned? I am in dread, and I know not where to turn." For answer, Geoffrey burst into a torrent of blasphemy which made her shudder. He cursed Delandre and his sister and all their kind, and in especial he hurled curse after curse on her golden hair. "Oh, hush, hush!" she said, and was then silent, for she feared her husband when she saw the evil effect of his humour. Geoffrey, in the torrent of his anger, stood up and moved away from the hearth, but suddenly stopped as he saw a new look of terror in his wife's eyes. He followed their glance, and then he too shuddered, for there on the broken hearthstone lay a golden streak, as the point of the hair rose through the crack. "Look! Look!" she shrieked. "It is some ghost of the dead! Come away! Come away!" And seizing her husband by the wrist with a frenzy of madness, she pulled him from the room. That night she was in a raging fever. The doctor of the district attended her at once, and special aid was telegraphed for to London. Geoffrey was in despair, and in his anguish at the danger of his young wife almost forgot his own crime and its consequences. In the evening the doctor had to leave to attend to others, but he left Geoffrey in charge of his wife. His last words were, "Remember, you must humour her till I come in the morning, or till some other doctor has her case in hand. What you have to dread is another attack of emotion. See that she is kept warm. Nothing more can be done." Late in the evening, when the rest of the household had retired, Geoffrey's wife got up from her bed and called to her husband. "Come," she said, "come to the old hall. I know where the gold comes from. I want to see it grow." Geoffrey would fain have stopped her, but he feared for her life or reason on the one hand, and lest in a paroxysm she should shriek out her terrible suspicion, and seeing that it was useless to try and prevent her, wrapped a warm rug about her, and went with her to the old hall. When they entered, she turned and shut the door and locked it. "We want no strangers amongst us three tonight," she whispered with a wan smile. "We three? Nay, but we are two," said Geoffrey with a shudder. He feared to say more. "Sit here," said his wife as she put out the light. "Sit here by the hearth and watch the gold growing. The silver moonlight is jealous. See, it steals along the floor towards the gold. Our gold." Geoffrey looked with growing horror, and saw that during the hours that had passed, the golden hair had protruded further through the broken hearthstone. He tried to hide it by placing his feet over the broken place, and his wife, drawing her chair beside him, leant over and laid her head on his shoulder. "Now do not stir, dear," she said. "Let us sit still and watch. We shall find the secret of the growing gold." He passed his arm round her and sat silent, and as the moonlight stole along the floor, she sank to sleep. He feared to wake her, and so sat silent and miserable as the hours stole away. Before his horror-struck eyes the golden hair from the broken stone grew and grew, and as it increased, so his heart got colder and colder, till at last he had not power to stir, and sat with his eyes full of terror, watching his doom. In the morning, when the London doctor came, neither Geoffrey nor his wife could be found. Search was made in all the rooms, but without avail. As a last resource, the great door of the old hall was broken open, and those who entered saw a grim and sorry sight. There, by the deserted hearth, Geoffrey Brent and his young wife sat cold and white and dead. Her face was peaceful, and her eyes were closed in sleep, but his face was a sight that made all who saw it shudder, for there was on it a look of unutterable horror. The eyes were open and stared glassily at his feet, which were twined with tresses of golden hair, streaked with grey, which came through the broken hearthstone.